Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello.
I am so excited. I've got Briana Urbina here with me, who was introduced to me by our friend Scott Santons. And he said to me, oh, you absolutely have to have Briana on your show. So here we are, and we're almost ready for the winter holidays. And for those who celebrate Christmas, I know my kids are counting it down, and they're on the lookout for Santa. How's your holiday season going so far, Briana?
It's going good, although last week I was on vacation so now that we've just gotten back, it feels like, oh my God, Christmas, like we haven't wrapped. We've done 99% of the shopping, but it feels like it just flew by.
Oh, you were smart. You did your vacay before the crazy madness. And so now you can almost sort of avoid all the airports and stuff for the next few days, huh?
Yeah, that was my dad was so generous. He offered my wife and I an opportunity to take a vacation, child-free, for a week to celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary. So our 10-year anniversary was December 19th. We couldn't plan the trip to actually take place during the anniversary, so we went the week before the 19th. So it was really nice to get away, get some sun and away from the cold. But yeah, we missed the airport craziness, and the resort we went to was absolutely empty, which was nice.
Oh, there's nothing better than an empty resort.
It was so great. Like, there was literally very few people there. It was really, really nice. I got to talk to a lot of really cool folks from over in Mexico. So it was a really cool opportunity.
Wow, your dad totally hooked you up big time. So good inspiration. I don't know, for all of those who have adult children with kids, for all the grandparents out there, if you want to follow Grandpa Urbina's footsteps, yes. And Mom, if you're watching, I'm totally down with that too. I'd love to take my wife to Mexico and leave the kids with her for even just a few days. Would be delightful.
Well, I think my dad went about it the right way, because we and my wife eloped, so he didn't have to pay for a wedding. So, we made it to this 10-year milestone. Now he's shelling out money for a bit of a gift. So I liked his style. It's like, let me see if this thing sticks before I shell out any money to support this couple. We've made it now. We've been together for 12 years, 10 years married. And so now he was just like, okay, I'll watch your kid for a week, go to Mexico, use my timeshare.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So he was a conservative, taking a conservative approach, trying to make sure everything's all set before he makes a bigger investment.
Yeah, definitely.
So Briana, tell me a little bit about your run for Congress. Like, where are you running for? Have you done this before? I don't know. I'm not super familiar with your background, and I'm sure our audience would love to learn more.
Sure. So I live in New Carrollton, Maryland, which is in Prince George's County. Prince George's County is kind of known nationally for being the epicenter of Black wealth in the nation. Prince George's County, Maryland, has the highest concentration of Black wealth in the nation. And
more than Atlanta.
More than Atlanta. Although I imagine Atlanta is on the come up with all the entertainers that live there. Here we have a lot of people who work who are government contractors, ex-military, who are working in highly educated spaces, high concentration of Black attorneys and HBCU grads. As county is really known for, it's just a neighboring county right to DC. So I live 9 miles door to door. Even less from the Capitol. I would have a great commute to Capitol Hill on the metro. It's probably about 15 minutes.
Oh my God!
So that's where I live. I know it was the best commute I've had since I've lived here. Anybody who knows the DC area knows that 9 miles does not mean anything in terms of how long a drive that is. Depending on time of day. So I've lived in 6 years, and my congressman is Steny Hoyer, the leader of the party. And when I first moved here, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, wow, he's got like a pretty good record on some things. And I was really kind of satisfied with the status quo Democrat. And it was only in the more recent years, post like in this blue wave, that I started really examining, do I want to have me 80% of the time, or do I want to have it with me 100% of the time on the issues that matter? And I looked at his voting record and I was dissatisfied. I am a former public I am a rights attorney, and those experiences professionally have motivated me to be more civically engaged personally. So looking at his voting record on things like healthcare, on climate, on a lot of different issues that matter, I was really disappointed. And I thought, I wish there was someone else who was running who had the experience of what it was like to be in a classroom that was underfunded, to be working with students who were homeless, to be working with, as an attorney, I worked as a housing attorney and as a disability rights attorney. Working in those communities, I wish we had representation who knew what that was like. And ultimately, I decided that I would stand in the gap and put myself out there on the line to represent the people I've served. I like to tell people I'm not running because I was such a great teacher and such a great lawyer. I wasn't. I burned out after a year of being a public interest lawyer because I had a caseload that was unmanageable. I only spent 2 years in the classroom because I had 36 kids with IEPs. I'm not running because I was good at those jobs. I'm running because those things are the things that we need to reform in this country. And nobody can be successful in the current system we have. So I want to speak truth to power on those issues.
So is Steny retiring, or are you?
No, I'm trying to help him out. I'm trying to help him get to retirement. He just turned 80 years old. And, for an old white guy, I think he looks pretty good. He's got great posture and he's got a full, he's 80.
So you're going to have to, you're going to try and get the party nomination from him in your district.
Yes. And he's been in office for 38 years. Prior to that, he was the president of the Maryland State Senate. So he has been on the ballot for 52 years. So there isn't a door I've knocked on of someone who hasn't voted for Steny Hoyer at one point in their lives.
Right.
Unless you're older than him, you can't remember a time where he was not on your ballot.
Wow.
And I have knocked on some doors of some people over 80, but for the most part, people just know him as an institution. And I think that he's done a lot of great things in his career, but the party is moving to the left, and I don't see him moving with us. And if you're not moving with us, you're moving against us. And so that's there's really no in between.
Well, kudos to you for being willing to get in the ring when you're going to be up against an opponent who I'm imagining has a war chest and name recognition up the wazoo. As you mentioned, everybody's seen him on the ballot for decades, literally. Yeah. And then he gets a lot of media coverage because he's the
majority leader.
He's the
most well-resourced member of Congress. He has not faced a significant primary challenge in many, many years. Most of the time, people are afraid to run against him because he has so much power and influence over how the state is run. So I've had state senators and delegates tell me, I'm going to vote for you on election day, but I can't take a picture with you now.
Oh.
And I say, well, the picture will help.
They're kind of related.
But I understand, and I understand where they're coming from, because he is almost 100% corporate financed. More than 99% of his money comes from high dollar donors and corporate PACs. And a lot of the less nice corporate PACs, like we're not talking about, Justice Democrats money. We're talking about about Sackler family money and Blue Cross Blue Shield money, and a lot of the healthcare and energy money, pro-Israel PAC money. So he does spread that money around the party. He doesn't end up using it mostly for himself. He uses it for a lot of down ballot races in places where Democrats really, really struggle to win. This is a plus 26 Democrat district, which means that we have 26% more Democrats registered to vote than Republicans. So it's a solid blue district.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I don't think the answer to corporate money in politics is getting more corporate money from to fund politics. And
so have you had a chance to run into AOC and get some tips from her? Because I guess she kind of, went up against someone that they said would never lose as well.
yeah, I haven't gotten to cross paths with her yet. I saw her speak one time in Silver Spring, Maryland, in Jamie Raskin's district, and I got to talk a little bit with her boyfriend Riley because I recognized him in the audience, and I thought that was the easiest in. So he and I chatted a bit. I'm originally from the Bronx, so we talked a little bit about the 6 train where he and Congressman
there you go.
Ocasio-Cortez live, and he asked for some literature, and he said he was going to give it to her. So I hope she got it, but we haven't crossed paths yet.
Right. I guess if she showed up at an event with you, that'd be kind of a big deal, right?
That would be kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And she and I have a few funny things in common. We're both Puerto Rican from the Bronx. We both lived in the Bronx as young children and then moved to the suburbs as young children to be raised away from the Bronx. We moved when I was 4, and then I moved back to the Bronx as an adult, and the first job I took there was as a community organizer, and I did public health work across all 5 boroughs. Well, 4 boroughs. Anybody who's from New York knows you don't go to Staten Island unless you live there. But, four boroughs of New York, I did public health work in community organizing. Went to college in the Bronx, and so it's funny. Her story mirrors mine in a lot of ways. In these, we share this demographic identity. We share the experience of knowing what's different out in the suburbs versus what people in inner cities are experiencing, and this courage to take on the establishment and speak truth to power. So she is definitely somebody I admire a lot. But I would say that this race here in Maryland is more akin to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley's district, in that I don't have anything bad to say about the congressman. We disagree on how politics should be financed, but overall, this district has gotten younger, it's gotten browner and blacker and more progressive over time, and that's evidenced by who we elect in our local government. There's 5 counties in this district. So it's very, very, very diverse in terms of, we have coastal communities, rural communities, inner city communities, suburban communities. We have everything. We have immigrants from West Africa, from East Africa, from Central America. This community is changing, and I think it's time that the representation reflect what the community looks like now, where the community is going, not where it's been.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like from a policy point of view, there's probably more in common than different between you and Hoyer, but you also feel like it's just time for a new perspective and a new generation that's more representative of the people that are in the district.
Yeah, and like I said, I want to build on the things that he's done well. One of the things that Steny Hoyer is credited with, that a lot of people know him for, is investing in jobs in the district. When earmarks were how Congress worked, he brought a lot of jobs here. He brought the IRS here. We have a NASA headquarters in our district. We have the USADA in our district. We have a lot of military bases in our district, and good government jobs that support the high income needed to live comfortably in this district. He's done a great job in doing that, and continue to do it creatively, since earmarks are no longer how the budgets work in Congress. That's something I want to continue to build on, continue to provide for our veterans living in Pax River, living in Andrews, living around those base communities. That's something I want to continue to build on. I don't want to tear down what he's done, but I think that the way that we need to do it is, like I said, without that corporate influence. There's a straight line between how Steny Hoyer votes on healthcare and how the healthcare lobbyists ask him to vote. And so doing this with grassroots small dollars, our average donation is about $42. That's the way of the future. That's how AOC is funding her campaigns up in the Bronx, and that's how a lot of these younger crop of Democrats are funding their countries, grassroots donation. That really speaks more powerfully, because if you collect, 10 30 people, or have one person give you $300, you're getting to hear from 30 different people, 30 different voices telling you what they want to see. And in our first quarter, the majority of our donations actually came from in district, which was really cool to see. I really want to make sure that I'm representing my neighbors well, with what they want. And unfortunately, money is such a big part of the factor of how these campaigns are run and won. This district, because we're so close to Washington, D.C. and have so much. This is not. This is a very high turnout district and a very highly educated district that wants to see representation that knows what they're talking about. So that engagement has been fascinating to me, to knock on doors and learn about people's experiences living here for a long time, why they moved here just recently, and in order to communicate with all those voters, you got to. So I'm proud of race in terms of bringing in money from small dollar donors.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that, and I certainly, I guess that's an encouraging sign that you're getting a lot of money from people actually in the district and from a broad range of supporters versus, a few $1,000 checks, that kind of thing. What do you say to people who are in the district and say, you know what, Briana, I agree with you. Hoyer's been around a long time. He doesn't probably may not identify with some of the issues or perspectives that a lot of the people in the district have, but on the other hand, being the House Majority Leader, he has access and influence that he could then redirect to the district and kind of make sure at a minimum we don't get left out, and maybe even more so, like when they decide where to put the next IRS office, like it may not be a coincidence that it's in this district.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So like, how do you respond to someone who's like, I don't want to give up like a spot at the front of the line, even though I like you and I agree that he's a bit older, it's probably time for him to move on eventually, but why would we give up sort of the that kind of privileged access to the halls of power?
I've gotten this question before at a town hall, and it's funny, the answer I gave there didn't blow the crowd away, but I actually am committed to this answer. I think power is there for the taking, and I think I can remember a time, and the news feels like so long nowadays, like something that happened a month ago feels like it was 10 years ago, but I remember a time where a freshman member of Congress demanded to know whether or not the 17 presidential candidates who had declared at that point were going to attend the AIPAC conference. And she put that out there, and she said, I want to know how you feel about AIPAC. I want to know if you're going to be attending the AIPAC conference. And all 17 members had to answer. And many, for the first time in years, decided not to attend that conference. AIPAC is an organization that supports American-Israeli relationships and foreign policy. So that member of Congress was Ilhan Omar. I didn't know Ilhan Omar's name in 2015. I didn't know it in 2016. I didn't know it in 2017. I learned about Ilhan Omar maybe 3 months before she won her race. Yeah. So power is there for the taking, and people who are speaking truth to power from a place of community and demanding to be heard. Power does not come from a title. I always say that leadership is not a title. And my congressman has the title of leadership, but if he's not answering and speaking truth to power on the issues that matter for Maryland 5th District residents, then that power is just as easily going to be ceded to someone who is. And I plan on talking every day about the issues that are affecting voters here, and that's how we'll get things done. That's how we'll make sure that our water is clean down at the Pax River Navy base. That's how we'll make sure that people are going to be able to afford to send their children to the University of Maryland, one of the best schools in the country. That's how we're going to make sure that our HBCUs are funded like Bowie State. That's how we're going to, when we speak truth to power and we take that mic and really and fight for the issues that matter. And that's something that Steny Hoyer has lapsed on in the past, and I understand he's got a lot on his plate. His job is to make sure that Democrats are elected across the country. His job is to whip votes. His job is to represent us. His job is to make sure that people are raising enough money across the country to win these races. My job will be simple. It will just be to represent the people of Maryland 5th District. I'm not interested in, I'm grateful that someone else is doing all that work, but the issues are too important here for us to take on all of that. We have almost the same amount of rate of foreclosure here in Maryland's 5th District that we had in 2006.
Oh, wow. Why is that?
That was happened. So, because communities of color are always the last ones to feel the remedies that happen systemically, and we didn't actually do any remedies of the housing crisis in 2006. Other than bailing out the banks, there was nothing that was actually done to help homeowners who engaged in subprime mortgage lending. So a lot of people over time, those artificial rates went up, the jobs went away. We've had, a couple government shutdowns. We've had some austerity measures that have affected the federal government, and all of those things trickle down into the housing market. We also have the extreme measures. This part of the district, like I said, there's 5 counties. There's parts of the district that are 2.5. But in our part of the district, we are absorbing mass displacement of people being gentrified out of Washington. And they come here and they move to Prince George. Higher income because they're working in DC, their connections are in DC, but the lower income Prince George's residents are the ones that are affected by the absorption of the mass exodus that was a lot of communities in DC that can no longer. So all of those things, these are the things I want to spend my time talking about. I'm not worried about getting Democrats in Kansas elected. I'm worried about my next door neighbors. I'm worried about the people in Southern Maryland who have access to only one district. These are the things I'm more concerned about. So this has been mind-boggling because, like I said, this district is so big, and there are parts of the district I had never been to before. Deciding to jump in and run, and the challenges we face are great, and we need a full-time member of Congress taking on these issues.
Yeah, in a weird way, it sounds like you're taking a district first approach, which is which is refreshing because that's what Congress people are supposed to do in theory, right?
Yeah, representative democracy, right? So yeah, I don't want to be it's like a MAGA, like a type of thing. The Maryland district is great. It literally is great. It doesn't need to be made great again. It is great. We have beach. We have coastal communities. We have communities that rely on metro. WMATA, which is the metro system of the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. We have so much diversity right here in terms of racial diversity, age diversity, landscape diversity. So it is a really cool place to be from, and a cool place for me to be raising my son, and for us to are going to bury in the backyard one day. So this is where we've planted our roots. But yeah, no, I don't want that MAGA comparison to make Maryland type of analogy.
Yeah. No, I imagine that's the only thing you have in common with MAGA is that you want to put your voters first, and I think that's an admirable thing. Let me ask you mentioned you had previously been a public school teacher, and you alluded to the fact that it's really hard for anybody who's committed to that profession or vocation almost to succeed. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what was it like as a public school teacher trying to do the right thing?
So I was a special education teacher, which is definitely probably the most challenging role you can take on in a school. And something that's not really known outside of the field of education is that most teachers are special education teachers. The way special education through a mostly inclusion model, there isn't a classroom in America that doesn't have a child with special needs in it. But my role specifically was to cater only to those children with special needs and the kids who needed to be identified through the quote unquote child find process. This is how we identify children who might need more assistance. That was my role. And I worked in 2 different charter schools DC is about a 50-50 charter to public school funded kind of education landscape. And I taught through Teacher America placed me in these two different schools. The thing that was most overwhelming to me that I didn't anticipate coming into the classroom teaching young children with special needs was the pushback I was going to get from administrators on how much things cost. It never occurred to me that I would have to think about budgets. Like as a teacher, I thought my whole responsibility was to teach these kids how to, read, write, reading, writing, arithmetic type of thing. No, like my job, I had to think about how much evaluation cost and whether or not it was going to fundamentally change the child's life if they had it. And so I had a student at my first school. I'm going to give him a new name right now. We'll call him Tyrone. Tyrone was a second grader who could not write his own name, who had difficulty walking up and down stairs, and couldn't count past 10. And day one, I started screaming at the top of my lungs, we need to get this kid evaluated. This kid needs some help. I don't know how he's gotten all the way to the second grade. In DC, we have universal pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. So this kid had been in school for quite some time and no one had identified that this child. And so it took until school year. School year starts in August in DC. March of that school year before we were able to get him evaluated. And he had an IQ of 58, which is incredibly low. It requires a lot of assistance. A student like that oftentimes will attend a non-public school, and that's not the same thing as a private school. It's a school for students with special needs who require physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, maybe ABA therapy if they're on the autism spectrum. We require require assistive technology and other types of supports to get an education. And what that kid got instead was 5 hours a week with me at a regular school and a regular classroom with ordinary kids of varying abilities. And I was devastated, and the reason why I know what kids should be entitled to is that I'm the parent of a child with special needs, and I'm also the older sibling to a brother with special needs. And my brother had the Cadillac of care because my parents knew how to argue and how to fight for it. And my brother's IQ is 64, and each point is significant under 70. So my brother had all of these services available to him that I could not get my school to give my student. And the difference was that the student's mother was poor, was Black, and was also a person with disabilities. And so the school knew they could get away with it. The school knew she wasn't going to sue. And Tyrone was one of many kids where I had to constantly was arguing with administration to get more services, more resources, more help for, and oftentimes being told, just focus on these test scores, focus on what you can do with the kids who are more able, try to get those kids across the finish line. Don't worry about the ones at the bottom, unless their parents are threatening to sue. And so after 2 years in the classroom of constantly being told that I could not give the students what they needed, I decided to use my law degree again to start working in education policy and civil rights policy to fight for kids like that on a more systemic level. Because, one by one, yes, I had a lot of students who had great successes, students who grew three grade levels in one school year in reading. And those students are just as valuable and important to me as well. And those success stories are meaningful to me too. But the students that I couldn't help, but for funding, but for access, but for education of the administrators involved. My principal was somebody who had only taught for 2 years and didn't have a master's degree and never taught in an inner city school district in his life. But for all those things, that's why I had to leave the classroom. I had to move on. And so, a lot of I taught in DC, which I said is really close to where I live. And a lot of my students actually lived in my congressional district and were falsely attending school in the District of Columbia. It's very, very common that students live in Maryland and go to school in DC because their parents have been gentrified out of DC. So their parents still want them to have the same DC education that they had as children, or maybe their parents work in DC. And it makes more sense for their child to be in a school in DC. So even though I taught in a community that's not like, my me and my students lived right around this area, and I took them home sometimes from school if their parents couldn't get out of work or something. So I see how this affects just as much as it affects our friends and neighbors over in the district.
Examples like Tyrone, where he had been able to get a more supportive environment and more access to services to help him, reach his full potential and be more successful. Like, what do you think when you fast forward 15 years and he's an adult and he's out there in society trying to make ends meet? Like, do you think it's like a life-changing thing? Like, if he had gotten instead of 5, like 10 hours a week, or would it have made that big of a difference, do you think? Or
oh yeah, I definitely think it would have made a huge difference. And so my next job when I left the classroom, I worked for the deputy mayor for education in the District of Columbia. And I had access to amazing, DC does a great job of keeping amazing statistics on their students. And I had access to all these resources, and it was overwhelming to me because there had been a study at one point that showed how students who are now performing at grade level in third grade, reading on a grade level at third grade, what happens to them. And a lot of people in education will tell you that they go to prison, that is exactly what happens, that the amount of prison beds that are forecasted for comes from third grade reading scores. So if your child is not reading in third grade on grade level, they are preparing a bed for prison for your child. So when my child was in third grade, my child has dyslexia and has ADHD. We were trying everything and nothing was working. And I was fighting for this dyslexia diagnosis. This child has the benefit of having a mother who is a special education teacher / attorney / caregiver to an adult with special needs. So this kid had all the equipment they could have. And finally, I got him into a program outside of school that cost $96 an hour to remedy dyslexia. And it was amazing because most of the kids that were in the program with my son did not have dyslexia. They were just rich kids who were getting ahead. And that's, their parents could afford $96 an hour to get their kids ahead. And it really made me sad looking at the data and looking at my son and looking at how hard he had to work. And we got him into this program for free for 3 months. And I guess their hope was that in 3 months I would find, $1 million buried in the backyard and I could continue the treatment for my son. We had to pull him out because we couldn't afford it. But yeah, I told the executive director of that center, these other kids here are going to write about how they overcame dyslexia on their admissions essays to Harvard. Son, who I adopted at 8 years old, who's been bounced around the system a bit, who has dyslexia and who was third grade, there was a prison bed made for him. And when we got him to that center in the fourth grade, that bed was already made. So I'm fighting with all my heart to make sure that my kid ends up with all the opportunities available to him. And if for him that looks like trade school, it's like college, and it's college. If it looks like, going to college later, whatever it is, I'm going to put my efforts, my 100% of my attention on making sure that my child is statistic. But it's only because I know that statistic, having experiencing a career. For parents who don't know, it can be easy to get along with the flow. My son gets A's and B's on his report card, despite the fact that he's still reading 3 to 4 years behind. It's very easy for report cards and look gets put out and think that that's my kid's getting an education, he goes to school every day. The quality of that education is something that people in the education space, people like Andrew Yang, who created his test prep program for kids in New York City, really understand. There's a quality of education that's being delivered, and the only people who are getting access to that quality education are the ones who are the most privileged and the ones who almost least need it. If you have privileged parents, you can fail up if you're starting at the bottom, it's a very hard road to go. I feel like I'm being really depressing on this podcast.
No, you're keeping it real. We appreciate that, Briana. I mean, like as a parent with resources, I know for a fact that I am doing everything I can to give my kids as many opportunities and support and challenges as I can. And I also am the one that's writing the checks for these things. And I know, like, there is no way the sort of everyday American family trying to do the right thing is going to be able to provide their children with even a fraction of what some of the lucky are able to do. And I struggle with that personally because on the one hand, I have an obligation to do, in my opinion, whatever I can to help my family do well.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it's very hard to know that there are kids out there through no fault of their own who are not going to get all the extra help and all of the enrichment and all of the small classes and all the stuff that I know my kids and a lot of other kids are going to get access to. And I'm sure that will have a huge impact on their adult success and sustainability and prosperity. And it just keeps repeating itself, right?
It doesn't have to be that way, though. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, so my mom grew up in pretty desperate poverty with two parents who didn't speak English, who were uneducated. My grandmother only attended elementary school in Puerto of six children. Yeah, she has 5 siblings, 6 children. So her parents were older when they were raising her, and she moved 17 times in 19 years with her parents, and it was because of poverty, like being evicted, moving around from place to place. But my mom had a great elementary and middle school education, and because of that, she got into Bronx Science High School, which is still one of the most elite high schools in the country.
Oh yeah.
And she did it without a test prep program, without you know, any resources at home. And at the time that she got accepted to Bronx Science, she was living in Brooklyn. And a teacher went to my grandparents, a teacher who spoke Spanish, went to my grandparents' apartment and said, "You have to let her go." And they were like, "We're not going to let her go to high school in the Bronx. It's 2 hours away." And she hadn't applied to babysitter, something that was closer. But this is her ticket out of poverty. And it might be all of your family's ticket out of poverty to let her go. She could provide for you in your old age. And so that is exactly what happened. My mom went to Bronx Science High School. She was the first in her family to graduate from college. She was the first to achieve a master's degree, and, you know, supported her parents financially throughout the rest of their lives. Starting in her 30s, she started providing her parents. So when you invest in schools the right way, when schools are supporting the needs of their students, you can overcome a lot of things. But this policy that we have right now that kind of expects children in poverty to be that rose that grows in concrete, to be exceptional. An average C student kid in a level should be just as many opportunities as the average kid in a high income neighborhood public school. But that's not the case. The kid who class at a high concentration of poverty might make it all the way through. But that's the kid I'm most concerned about. The average kid. So there's always going to be these exceptional kids. My son goes to Charles Carroll Middle School right here in New Carrollton, Maryland. It's the most school in Prince George's County, and it has an extremely high immigrant population. And what it's most amazing to a school function, the standing room only. These families, these immigrant families, they don't just, back to school night's not just for mom and dad. It's grandma and grandpa and Theo and Thea and like 12 people per family coming to back to school night. And it takes 3 hours longer than these two because we're translating into multiple languages. Inspiring to me. So there's a false narrative that low-income communities don't care about education. It's something I've seen perpetuated by a presidential candidate. That is not
Mm-hmm.
true. People care about education. People understand education. But people also know what, you know, you don't have to be educated to know what time it is. If you see that your school's not being invested in, if you see that a dilapidated, like my son's, where they've been in trailers for more than 10 years, you see that on the outside, you know what's going on the inside. So that investment has to be both ways.
What is like your son's school? You mentioned was pretty overcrowded. Like, what is the typical class size like for his
So
classes?
my
Like
son is
one teacher to how
my
many?
son is in so it's 32 students per class. My son, because he has an IEP and special person class, so he's in a smaller section. But because there are 19 instead of 32, higher concentration of students with English language learning and special education. So of any between 7 to 10 of those students are receiving additional services via an IEP or their English language learners, whereas
Mm-hmm.
it would be a smaller ratio. But we fought for him to get into the smaller class size because of his learning needs. He is in the additional
Yeah.
for him to focus.
So in that class of 19, how many teachers are in that class? In the classroom, like when he's with the other 18 kids?
Yes. So there are
Okay,
two.
so it's like one to 9.
Class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a great
And I guess that ratio
available to him
yeah.
because he has an IEP.
And then in the other class where it's 32 kids in the class, is it just the one teacher with the 32?
Just the one teacher. Yeah.
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 There's no teacher's assistant in there as well?
I think they have some of course subjects, but not all. Not science and social studies. I think it's just reading and math has assistants. And then we needed him to have an assistant in every class. And then my son gets pulled out for so my son has specials 1 day a week, and then on the off day he has academic resource, which is kind of like a smaller remedial class for reading and math. He has that, where the other kids who don't have academic resource, they get specials every day. So my son sacrifices specials because he has a disability.
Yeah, that's really I agree with you that if you are the next if you're the next Barack Obama, like you'll find a way, like you'll just rise because you're once in a generation. I worry more about the folks that are on the borderline, who are on the borderline between being functional, like self-sustaining adults who can take care of themselves and their families and not. And you know, it's interesting because that difference, if they fall, like just if you run the numbers, the cost of prison and the court system for someone's adult life is probably going to be way more than giving them more resources in elementary school, right?
Absolutely. No, I saw a study recently that said California state prisons spend almost $80,000 to keep someone incarcerated. There's no per pupil foundation that is spending $80,000 a year on any school, private or public. The kids at Dalton and Spence, like the fanciest schools in Manhattan, and the poorest cities in Mississippi, there's no one who's paying $80,000 a year for per pupil.
Seriously.
Attend a school. And that's shameful because it can prevent it. You know, like I said, if we can identify the kids that are most likely to end up in prison, whether it be because they're self-medicating for mental illness, whether it be because they're committing crimes of city as adults, and we can identify these kids in third grade, then this is a solvable problem. You know, remedied.
What do you say to people out there who argue, well, but the US as a country, we do spend a lot on education per pupil, obviously not $80K. We've been spending more over time. And like, so what's, why are we still at this terrible place where many of us would not want our own kids in these environments, yet as a country we're spending more and more? Like what's that all about? Like, why do you think it's like pushing a string here? What's going on?
No. So when I took that first job outside of the classroom in the deputy mayor's office, I was in this one public policy meeting, a bunch of really amazing, talented, educated, intellectual experts discussing problem in DC public schools, attendance, chronic absenteeism, and truancy. And it was one of those, it was a great meeting because people were able to just kind of spitball their ideas on what kids into school. And it was my first week there. So I was sitting very quietly. I didn't really want to ruffle any feathers, but the whole time I was whispering to my senior, also a former teacher, none of these ideas will ever work. And she was like, yeah, I know. Don't worry about it. None of these ideas are going to happen. And I said, are you sure? And she was just like, well, why don't you raise your hand and say something? So I did. And so I raised my hand. I was like, none of these ideas are going to work. and they were like, who are you, person who just showed up? And I said, well, I used to teach, and none of these ideas are going to work because they don't really like apply to like, you're just talking about like hypothetical people that don't exist in DC, and real actual, for my students who had serious problems with attendance, the number one issue was getting to school on time, having adequate transportation, and there's no school bus, so you're getting to school via public transit or by a car. And so if the car breaks down, that's unexpected. If the bus isn't running on schedule, these are the issues that were preventing my students from coming to school timely and regularly. And so we have a lot of people making decisions in this country about students who have never been in a school before, who have never asked a teacher what would work. And that's something that I'm bringing to this race. Like, I'm the only person running for Congress that I've heard so far that has not just been in an active shooter drill, but been in an active shooter situation as a teacher. We had a student shooting that took place outside of our school in DC. And because the principal heard the gunshots and didn't know if they were in the building or outside of the building, we were put in that code lock situation. And I sat in a closet for 20 minutes in perfect silence, waiting to know if I was going to walk out of school that day. And so when you talk to you talk to real administrators and students about what's needed to close those opportunity gaps, also known as the achievement gap, a lot of those solutions cost money, but a lot of them don't. And unfortunately, we have too many people making decisions about our students across the country who've never been in a classroom, so they couldn't possibly know what's really needed. So a lot of money does get thrown in the garbage. I've seen districts implement district-wide policies that cost millions of dollars that don't actually address any issues, because sometimes issues are very school specific. Sometimes they're very even like class specific. And so I don't like one size fits all solutions for across the country. I've gotten into a lot of interesting discussions in this election about the use of charter schools, and a lot of people see charter schools as an easy enemy to poke at. Oh, we can't privatize our schools. But for a lot of communities, charter schools are actually what's getting it done. And it's Black and brown children who are choosing, and Black and brown parents who are choosing these charter schools. And I'm not going to be the one to tell a community that's been disenfranchised by a broken education system for 50 years, I'm going to make this decision for you. You don't get to choose this private option. And on the other side, I've seen public school systems across the country that are doing amazing things, that are really investing in the community school models, using trauma-informed and research-based solutions to address issues specific to their culture. And I'm in support of that. Like, when school leaders and teachers are getting autonomy to do what's right, oftentimes they do get better results. But these top-down mandates about like school should be X, that's oftentimes where you see the money mismanaged, I think. And
so we've talked about the teachers, your experience as a teacher, what your observations have been about some students, the family's involvement, and now we're touching a little bit on school administration. And I was curious, like, there's all of these interesting stakeholders when it comes to education. Like, there's the school administration. There's also often talked about teachers' unions. And I was curious, like, what role do you think administrations and unions play, if at all, in how where we are today and how we can move forward? Do you think there's anything they can do differently?
I mean, the teachers unions that I've observed both as a student and as a professional working in the education system that are the strongest, that they exercise their bargaining power with the I don't know why I'm being bilingual right now, but con fuerza, with strength. They are the ones where the teachers have the best quality of life, and you oftentimes see teachers staying in the classroom for longer. And the longer a teacher stays in the classroom, the better they're going to get at it. So in districts where you have people teaching for 1 and 2 years, and then you're turning over, you're going to have the same chronic issues related to school culture and academic achievement over and over and over again. But in districts where, like in New York, where teachers do make a decent living, where the salaries are commensurate with the standard of living, the cost of living in New York City and in neighboring areas, where the teachers unions have been strong, you see better outcomes across students, across adult culture, which I think is incredibly important. So I'm a really, really strong supporter of strong teachers unions. Growing up in New York, I didn't even really recognize the majority of teachers across the country are not unionized. I went to law school in North Carolina, and one of my best friends was a classmate of mine who had left teaching to go to law school. And with a master's degree and 13 years experience, she was making $38,000 a year as a teacher in North Carolina. And it's not like those kids are any less challenging. It's not like the job is any less demanding.
Yeah.
And it's not even like the income was commensurate with what the cost of living is in the Charlotte metro area of Charlotte, North Carolina. It was just because they didn't have any access to bargaining power. So I'm a big supporter of teachers unions overall, and making sure that teachers are getting what they need to do well. You talked about stakeholders, including administrators and you know, different districts are run differently. Here in Prince George's County, we've had serious issues of corruption at the top, where we constantly are getting a new director of schools. This is one of the largest school districts in the country, and like I said, this area specifically is interesting because despite the high median income, it's a median income of 96,000 for a family of 3 here. Despite the fact that we have this high concentration of African American wealth and highly educated adult population of people with post bachelor's degrees here, this school district is very low performing because anybody who has a little bit of money oftentimes chooses a private education option for their child. So our district is oftentimes absorbing the kids with the highest amount of need, the highest amount of highest need for support, things like English language learning programs and things like that. So when the school district is only serving a population that is high need, the district needs to be given the freedom, the flexibility, and the financing to be able to address the needs of the students that are coming through the door. Like I said, at my son's school, it's all the school events are made much longer by the fact that there's a significant need for translation. By middle school, a lot of these kids are speaking English in a way that they can understand and get through a school day, but speaking English to be able to talk with your friends and speaking English to be able to be college and career ready is something completely different. These kids don't have that support to get that college and career English proficiency support for their homework at home, so they need it at school. So this school needs more money for that than the school down the block that's not serving, a high immigrant population. So the answers are to law school too. The answer is it depends. The answer is always so I think today's politics wants to see some black and white concrete answers, but the answers are more nuanced. And the candidates who these things from experience are the ones who are going to be able to lead on these things, and listen for what the true solutions will be. Community by community, school by school, district by district.
Well, Briana, I feel like we could spend hours talking about education, and I have so many more questions, but I also want to be mindful of time. And I wanted to hit a couple other quick topics before we wrap up our conversation. So the first one is, obviously, if Scott Stanton's connected us, then I'm guessing you are familiar with the concept of universal basic income. And I was curious, what's your take as a congressional candidate and former public school teacher? Like, do you think what do you think would help or hurt, or how would it pan out if we did that?
It definitely won't hurt. I am a big supporter of universal basic income, and that is why I'm actually announcing today, and I will be announcing it via Twitter, that I am 100% endorsing Andrew Yang for president. And the reason why, yay! You're getting the breaking news here that my endorsing Andrew Yang. I've been waiting to do it. School all this time.
I love it. I'm so sorry. I got diverted because it's such an interesting topic, but I'm also super excited. So how did you decide to do that? What was the thought process?
So what's interesting is when he first came out, and when the candidates started filing, initially I was drawn to Elizabeth Warren, and there are things that I as well. But the reason why, when people would ask me, why don't you want to go all in for Yang, I would say, well, I don't know if he's electable. And then I recognized that that's the same thing people are saying about Steny Hoyer. They would say, oh, I don't know if she's electable. This is her first time running. She doesn't have as much money. She doesn't have this experience. And what I would try to tell people, I'm qualified. I'm the best able to do this job. My experiences are most vital to being able to serve my community. I want to bring in new ideas. And then when I would present that to people, a lot of times they'd say, you know what, you're right. I want to take a chance on you. So as the debates went on, and I was watching all the coverage and reading about the policies of all of the candidates, I kept on coming back to Yang and saying, I like him the best, but I don't know if he's going to have what it takes. And I decided, you know what, I had to let go of that, because if we only pick the candidate that's electable, Hillary Clinton was the most electable candidate in 2016. And that's Bernie Sanders more electable. If we only go with the candidates that are we think actually are speaking about the issues that matter, the candidates who committed to their cause, the candidates that really speak to our hearts, then we're going to keep on getting the same establishment candidate over and over and over again. And that's not what I want to see for my district. That's not what I want to see for my country. So there was one moment that really kind of got me. And it was when he was talking about, it was in a debate, it was over the summer, I think it might have been the July debate, when he told his wife that he wanted to run for president, her first question was, what are we going to do for healthcare? And it just that he knows exactly what it feels like to be a normal American, not knowing where your health insurance is going to come from. He has a child with special needs. I'm crazy thing healthcare this year running for office. I have a child with special to keep healthcare. So his ability to just be honest and truthful and show how he gets it really made me want to come out and support him. And so I've been waiting, just because I didn't want to come from a place of deficit. Gone through a lot of turmoil. We were really, really struggling financially, and the Yang Gang really pulled us through and over the. With all those things that we were going through, I didn't want to endorse him then because I thought it would seem exploitative. I didn't want people to think that I was endorsing him because I needed help. But now that we're in a safe and comfortable place, I'm excited to announce my endorsement of him, and to announce my support. And, like I said, it was because he gets it, but also the universal basic income component. I think universal basic income is a long overdue. I'm a big I would like to consider myself to be a little bit of a civil rights historian. I love to read the works of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and so I read a lot of the things that say about universal basic income. And hearing that in these times where we are polarized as a nation, where we're more conscious of our racial history than we ever have been as a country, to the point now where people are really talking about things that they've never been ready to talk about before. I think now is the time that we need to be fighting for universal social justice standpoint. I know that from an economic standpoint, in terms of dealing with our crisis of automation, to me in my heart and as a civil rights attorney and as a teacher is the social justice standpoint. We are not on an equal playing field in this country, and universal basic income won't necessarily do that. I don't have any illusions of universal basic income putting us all on the same playing field. But a fiscal remedy that can eliminate people living under the poverty line seems like the most basic, simple way for us to move forward. And so Scott and I had a nice long talk about social justice and Martin Luther King and basic income. And at that time I didn't even tell Scott that I wanted, but he was the one that connected us because I feel so wholeheartedly about promoting universal basic income, and I'm excited to be officially joining the Yang Gang today.
I love it. Well, welcome officially to the Yang Gang.
Oh no, I can't
it's
hear
so
you.
exciting.
There's a problem with the sound.
Oh no, can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
I can't hear you anymore.
Oh no. Do you want to come back? Do you want to try and drop off and then come back? Hello?
Oh. No.
Nothing? Let's see. Briana.
I'm doing a bunch of things. I'm hitting a bunch of buttons. You can keep going. I may have to call back.
All right. Yeah, let me You gotta love live streaming. You gotta love live streaming. All right. Do you want to maybe come back?
I
Yeah.
end it. All right.
Come back. All right. Deborah thinks it's the Russians. It could be the Russians. It could be the Buttigieg campaign. I'm not sure. But while we're waiting for Briana to come back, let me just say how awesome it is that we got another endorsement from someone who's running for Congress, from a person of color, from a public school teacher, public defender. This is just what a fantastic week we've been having. We had that great debate. Now we're getting more and more endorsements, and we're getting ready for, I think, a surprise in New Hampshire for sure, maybe even Iowa. We'll see. And people are asking. Oh, Jay is saying, "Hey, is it Urbina or Briana?" Her name is Briana Urbina. Briana is her first name. Urbina is her surname, and she is running for Congress in Maryland. And hopefully, she will be coming back soon. Oh, I see her attempting to rejoin. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, that was, I thought you're doing some kind of like, I'm going to endorse and like mic drop moment. It was just like, that's all you need to know. I'm out.
Did you hear anything?
Oh yeah, we heard everything.
Okay.
We heard
okay. You heard me freaking out because I couldn't get back on the
phone. Oh yeah, we heard that you're tapping a lot of buttons, which which is all always.
I pushed all the buttons. And
sometimes that works. Sometimes that works. So do you think there's an opportunity for you and Andrew to campaign together ever, or what do you think?
There have been some conversations about that so far. So I've been in touch with some of the higher ups in the campaign, and we're hoping to make those connections happen.
I would love that. I think you bring such an interesting point of view and voice. And, Andrew, I think is amazing with the economics and the data and the logic and sort of like the technology stuff. right? Yeah. But I think you as a public school teacher, a former public school teacher and public defender, and someone who's running from in a local district, talking about problems affecting people on the ground right now, that's a wonderful compliment to the narrative that he and the rest of the campaign are trying to put out there. So I'm hopeful that that you guys cross paths more as the campaign goes on. I was curious.
I know Virginia is a Super Tuesday. It's just a 20-minute drive away, so maybe we'll cross paths there.
Oh yeah, we'll send the bus to pick you up. Of course, I'm just a guy on YouTube, so I'll let the campaign figure out what's best to do. Well, let me ask you this, Briana. Like if you went in a time machine and went back to when you were teaching with that class that was pretty crowded, and sounds like there weren't a lot of resources even to even evaluate kids to determine if they needed extra help. How do you think it would have been different if each of those families were receiving a basic income of an extra $1,000 a month? Like, what do you think would have been different? Obviously, they would have more money, but how would it actually manifest itself in the classroom?
So, special educators and special education advocates will tell you that it has the opportunity to get a private evaluation done for their child and bring school to the school district and then get reimbursed for those results for the school district to get their student the supports and services they need. So that's something I would have definitely recommended for many ones that didn't have IEPs yet, but the ones who currently had them. The program that I put my child in, that was $96 an hour, would have been a great program for to enroll their child. My son has dyslexia, which can be very difficult to overcome. But I had students that were just behind because maybe they'd had a long from an illness, or they moved a lot in one school year, so they missed a lot of days of school. There was nothing cognitively challenging for them; they just missed time. For those families, having that extra $1,000 a month could have meant an investment in their child's education that could have caught them up to speed years found done in a traditional school day. I served a lot of homeless families. In the second school that I taught in, 30% of our kids were homeless. And the majority of homeless families in this area are homeless because they don't have money. That is not because they're on drugs. It's not because it's because they don't have money to pay rent. And so with a mean rent here of about $1,500 a month for a one bedroom, $1,000 a month could have kept many of these families housed and out of the shelter system. Out of the shelter system here can oftentimes put you in a hotel room an hour away, where you're paying a lot of money for a Lyft or an Uber to get you to and from the community where you are supposed to live, where you actually reside, but can no longer afford to pay rent in. There's so many things that $1,000 a month could have done for the families that I served, and that's why I really believe in universal basic income. And I've seen the studies coming out of Stockton, California, and how there, and they're using it for things like car repairs, so they can get to and from jobs, and to pay off bills and pay off debts, so that they can move forward and maybe even open their own business. Like, those are the types of things that people can cover, and these are opportunities people in my community really thriving under with you. So
you're not obviously there's been some spirited debate even within the Democratic Party that UBI would is sort of a secret strategy to undermine all other government programs. It's a Trojan horse kind of thing. How would you respond to people who have those legitimate concerns and are like, well, I'm worried that if we give people money directly, it'll be used as an excuse to take other things away? Obviously, like, we want to unify as a party and get behind this, and I don't want to dismiss those concerns, but I'm curious, like, how have you heard this on the campaign trail, and how do you respond?
I have, yeah. So I mean, there are definitely some programs and the way the freedom dividend is structured that would get eliminated with the universal basic, is significantly downsized with the universal basic. And a lot of those programs have a lot of barriers in the way for families to achieve rewards those programs. You know, TANF can be extremely cumbersome for a lot of families. The requirements and really they don't reward things like taking care of your children when they're at home. A lot of states that use TANF require a work requirement, and they require the families to be taking classes, but they don't pay for the transportation to get to and from those classes. So I believe in people agency and giving people power to make choices. And one of the things I really didn't like when I was a lawyer, and I am still a lawyer, but when I were in the courtroom, I worked with a lot of mentally ill clients, and my clients sometimes, you know, their mental illness would present and being very sometimes combative, sometimes loud, but oftentimes they were the ones that were most effectively able to speak to their experiences living in dilapidated housing, and they wanted to tell the judge about why they didn't pay their rent, and the reason would be because they had these extreme housing code violations. Tell my clients in private, let me be the one to tell the judge, because the judge could look at the client and see that this is a person with mental illness, and see the way that they're speaking and not hear them actually had to say. So I was the gatekeeper in that moment. My law degree afforded me the this to look like this, to dress like this, and I could get what that person couldn't get because I was the gatekeeper. A lot of these programs that we have, social welfare programs, social safety net programs, are gatekeepers in the ways that they prevent people from being able to use the money the way that they need to use it in order for them to get on their feet. Poor people are incredibly savvy with money. Poor people are like, a lot of times when I see these like needs to like, we need to teach people how to balance a checkbook. Poor people know how to balance a checkbook. The reason why they write more checks than they can afford is because they need more money than they have. Nobody wants to go to a payday loan check cashing store. People go there because they need to, not because they want to. So I think if we put the money in the hands of the people who need it, that they will overwhelmingly, and the studies show this already, make responsible choices that will elevate their families in their specific circumstances. Kind of like what we were talking about with education. It's not a one size fits all type of solution. So like I said, some people in Stockton use their money to repair their cars. Now, maybe that's not what the government thinks you should be doing it, but repairing a car could take you to a job, could take you to a college that can get you to a better job. That makes sense to me. I don't believe in telling people how they should spend their money. And I think that having a social safety net that lifts all people out of poverty, just like that, all at once, it really is the best solution. And you can probably hear how fast I'm talking, how passionate I am about this, because ultimately, we can't accomplish all these other goals that we have if we have people living in poverty. It's really, really hard to make monumental systemic change when there's scarcity.
Totally agree. I was having a related conversation with someone who isn't in the Yang Gang yet. And
yes, that's right.
and he was like, well, what happens if you give $1,000 a month and someone spends it on like lottery tickets or sneakers or something like that? And what I said was, well, okay, let's say that happens from time to time. Let's say it happens a lot of times. But then what about the family that does get the 1,000 and is able to get their kid a little extra tutoring, or take their kid to the dentist a little more often, or fix like a leaking roof over the living room? Like, I'm okay with a little bit of money going in places maybe that I wouldn't want it to, if it helps people who really do need it and are going to put it to the best uses. Because as a taxpayer, I know that money is going to go in these massive government programs anyway. And if they're not delivering as much benefit as a more kind of direct way, then I'm fine. Like, since when does every government program have to be perfect to implement it? Like, you could say the same thing about Social Security. I'm sure there's people that are doing all kinds of things with Social Security.
Could you imagine if we like funded our wars this way? Like if we were like, oh, we got to make sure every dollar goes to
right. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen with that extra $100. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, you know, it just we wouldn't get anything accomplished if we scrutinized the wealthy subsidies the way we scrutinize the subsidies for poor people. And this wouldn't be just for poor people; it would be for middle income people. It would be for all people. Universal basic income is for everyone. but yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to see. And let's say they want to spend it all on Jordans. That person they will take a bus or a train or a car to get to the store. That puts gas station owners money,
Yeah.
gas
Someone that
station
works
owners
at that
money.
store.
It puts money into public transportation. Someone works at that store. Maybe you're going to buy something when you're at the mall, like, and someone works in that food court. Like the money is going to come right back into the economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why food stamps is such a successful program, because the money comes right back into the community just as fast as it goes out, and it feeds people. So I think that I do differ from Andrew a little bit in that I'm not in support of a VAT tax. I just think that will end up getting trickled down to the consumer. I see how he's done the math, and he is better at math than I am. So it's possible that I could be convinced otherwise. But I would like to see a less regressive tax used to fund this, and I think that there are ways that we could go about doing that, cutting subsidies in other places that only benefit rich people.
Well, the good news is the Yang Gang is way more diverse than I think people give it credit for, and so I think it's great that you have a different view on how we're going to raise the revenue, or where the VAT should have exclusions. And I know Andrew's talked about being careful to exclude basic necessities from
Yes.
that coverage. But I think in the long run, we all want the same thing, which is we want more help to people and more freedom for the people to invest those resources the way that's right for their family and for them. And less of, to your point earlier, maybe less dependence on one size fits all solutions, because everybody's different.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm really excited to be joining the Yang Gang team, and I see these conversations happening all the time online and at different events that I've gone to with Yang Gang followers, and it is a diverse group of people. Some Republicans, some Democrat, not left, not right, just forward. Like I believe in that. I'm a unabashed, unapologetic progressive, and I like to think of myself as a leftist, but I'm more interested in getting things done than I am in holding on to that title. So
yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, Briana, I know we're running short on time, so I would suggest we do two things. Okay. One is, before we wrap up, we should definitely let people know, how can they find out more about you and maybe get involved in your campaign? Like how should they sort of stay up to date on what you're up to?
So the best way is to go on our website. It's www.urbina, URBINA, for us, FORUS.com, and you can learn more about us, sign up to volunteer. If you can make a small dollar donation, that would be great. I'm not really focused on that as much right now as I'm focused on promoting this race. Yep, my website's right there on your screen. But for those of you who are listening, it's URBINA, FORUS.com. We are also pretty active on Twitter. We've been a little lazy this month, and don't think it's because I'm not thinking of you. It's just because I went to Mexico and I promised my wife I wouldn't tweet while I was there. And then I got home and I got sick, but I am better now, and I am active on Twitter. Our DMs are unlocked. So if you want to reach out to us on Twitter, you get me personally. No one else is answering my tweets with me at this point. So that's the best way to get connected with me, and I'm so excited to have had this opportunity to talk to you guys.
I love it. I would encourage everyone to consider donating to Briana's campaign. Even, I know most of your money has come from in district, but if people are just interested in a stronger America, there's nothing against them supporting you in as well, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Steny Hoyer affects everyone, right? He's the majority leader of the party, and so his seat is important for all of us, not just us here in Maryland. So, getting a more progressive, more equity-minded member of Congress in that seat affects us all, for sure. Getting a new member of the leadership. The whole leadership is all in their 80s, so I think it's time for a new generation of leadership, and somebody who views leadership as a calling rather than just a title.
Amen. Well, let me say a couple things about fundraising before, and then we'll take some questions from folks in the chat, and then we'll let everybody get back to their holidays and enjoy the weekend. So I would like to encourage everyone listening and seeing this on the replay to do two things. One is Andrew still needs resources as well. So as a reminder, here is my short link to our Act Blue page. 100% goes to Yang 2020. but it tracks to see if the Nerds for Yang channel is producing good support, and that allows me to get more guests on the show from the Yang inner circle. I have some exciting new interviews in the pipeline, so I'll stay tuned for that. But what I will also tell you is that if you donate to Briana, not only does it help Briana, if you like her, if you like what you've heard so far, of course, but also I think it can show other people running for Congress that the Yang Gang is a movement, and that for people who are on the sidelines being like, I don't know, I really like him, but I don't know if he can do it. Like, here's another reason to do it. If you're running, that you can get support from a very dynamic, diverse, and active community. And so what I would love to see is a news story, maybe a week or two from now, which is, wow, this congressional candidate going against the establishment, who we agree with on a lot of things, but he's still part of the establishment in my opinion.
Yes.
She comes out for Yang, and the Yang Gang delivers. And other people are like, whoa, when I've endorsed other candidates, I didn't see this kind of like, groundswell of support. So I will tell you, Briana, after this live stream, I'm not gonna move the needle for you personally, but I will make a symbolic donation to kind of try and move the ball forward a few yards and get you another first down, hopefully.
Thank you. Yeah. We've gotten a lot of from the Yang Gang people. We've gotten several $3.14 nerd pie donations, and then we've also gotten a lot of 5 for District 5. So that's another way, every dollar is meaningful. It all
love it. Up. Yeah, 3.14 is a beautiful.
It was really funny when it first started coming in. I was just like, what? Oh, okay, math. Yes, I get it.
Yes, that's sort of like the code, which is like, oh, this must be coming from the Yang Gang.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so let's see if I can pull up a few questions, and then we will wrap up. Oh, by the way, Ms. Ramirez is saying she already donated before your endorsement, and she doesn't live in the district, but she just really likes you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez.
And let's see, here's another question coming up. Someone saying, what state? You're Maryland, and which
Maryland. District? Maryland 5.
Yeah, Maryland 5.
So Prince George's, Anne Arundel, Charles Calvert, in St. Mary's County, Maryland.
Someone is saying that Yang women rule, which is
that's true. Awesome.
And that Ward Smith is saying you are a gem.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. So what's great about the Yang Gang? I feel a lot of positivity from the Yang Gang.
Yes. No, they've lifted me up for the last several months. Ever since Scott started retweeting some of our stuff, it's really been like so much encouragement. And like I said, we went through a really tough time. We had some staff leave and some staff shakeups and things like that. And the Yang Gang, man, you guys lift me up every day. I can't quantify how much that means to me.
All right. And then the ending 0 just donated to you, hopefully more than 0, I'm sure. And then someone was just asking me, oh, who just opened the door behind me? I'm guessing it was my 9-year-old boy, who I told we would do a stream for an hour. We're running a little over.
Yes, no, that's okay.
He's very eager, I think, to either play Call of Duty or for me to take him to school for a little swim. But so I think that's the nerdling for Yang, very subtle way of telling me that it's time to
wrap up.
Time to wrap here. But Briana, thank you so much for spending time with us. Congratulations on the progress and traction with your campaign already. And I'm hoping that today is going to be an inflection point for your campaign and for the Yang Gang movement overall, because together we can make some real history and not just help the whole country, but also every district inside of it.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Briana. Goodbye, nerds.
Bye,
Goodbye, nerds. All right.